I'm Niall from One Direction, and this is our autobiography. Sometimes I wonder how my childhood prepared me for this madness of One Direction. On one hand, there's no preparing for this, certainly not on the scale that the band has grown to, but I can see how certain things in my early years have helped me. Funnily enough, there isn't really much musical history in my family. My parents didn't perform or have amateur singing careers, but they were really big music fans. I vividly remember two pivotal gigs that have hugely influenced me, both by the Eagles. I went to see them twice before I was even 10. That was a pretty big deal for me. The first concert I ever went to was Busted, and McFly opened up for them. The second gig I went to see was the Eagles. Two totally different ends of the spectrum. After that I was hooked, and I wanted to get up on stage, whether it was the choir or local productions, like Oliver, talent shows, or busking, anything to do with performing. I just wanted to get up there and perform. I auditioned when I was 16 for the X Factor, and then I moved in to the house a week after my 17th birthday, yeah. So kind of, as the band was being put together, I was like 16, yeah. The live shows I was 17. You know, as people know, you know, my childhood was cut short by the X Factor because, you know, One Direction took off and I never really got the chance to finish school or do my exams or anything like that. You know, I once said that after the first audition, I basically packed up everything in my life in a bag, and you know that's completely true, because what I didn't realise at the time was when I was stuffing the clothes into the little suitcase, you know, that was pretty much me leaving home for good. The first 6 months of One Direction was just really nuts. As soon as we got to the venues, TV studios, radio stations, people would say, "There's loads of girls by the gate," or a few hundred even. So we'd go out, chat with them, and try to meet as many as possible. In a pretty short space of time, though, the numbers grew and grew, and people started saying there are a few thousand outside. When we were on the X Factor, we all thought it was hard work, and it was, to be fair. But as soon as we left the show to go out there on our own, the work rate just went mad, total crazy. We were being shepherded around all over the place, and everyone wanted a bit of us. I don't mind admitting that a part of me was thinking, right, you have 6 months to do as much as you can. Chances are it's all going to be over after that. I think that probably a realistic way to be, and certainly meant that we never really slacked off or took any opportunity for granted. Obviously we managed to last a little longer than 6 months and we've got a good bit of success, but back then we didn't really know if each gig might be our last. Our first single didn't come out until September after the X Factor. So in the 9 months before that, we basically slugged it out in the back of a Mercedes van, in and out of hotels, the X Factor tour, time in the studio, radio stations, video shoots, doing photo shoots. We brought a book out, did loads of signings. We must have done every teen magazine on planet Earth before then. The band's horizon seemed to be getting bigger and bigger every day. Sitting here looking back, it's actually hard to think of everything that went on. It's honestly so difficult to remember because it feels like it was just yesterday, but also it was such a blur. It was really noticeable how all of us got along so quickly. We always had a good laugh, and the relationship between the 5 lads in the band just kind of happened. We spent every single day with each other and never really fell out. Our first PA tour of small clubs was a crucial part of us starting to become a unit. Driving up and down the country in a small van, performing at all these clubs, a couple of bar mitzvahs, and all that kind of stuff. On the first day we went into the studio in Sweden. It was in Stockholm, and we were literally going in to record What Makes You Beautiful, which we didn't realise at the time. On the first day, yeah, we went for lunch, and on our way back there was these 2 girls standing outside the studio, and we actually just walked straight past them, didn't even look at them, because we didn't even realise that they were here to see us. You know, they shouted out to us, and they got pictures, and we chatted, and we found out that they'd actually taken a huge train journey across Sweden to see us, and that was really our first taste of fans outside the UK, which we were all really shocked by, because you know, we didn't think that we were going to go anywhere outside the UK. And then when we seen these fans, you know, and then every time we went back to Sweden to do more recording, there was more people outside and outside the studio every time we went, and it was all a bit of a shock to us. And then from there it just went on all around Europe, and yeah, it was all a bit crazy. Our first album, Up All Night, was a good pop record in my opinion. I just couldn't believe what was happening with it going to #1 in all these countries. I knew we were working hard. I knew there was a buzz around the band, and that was perhaps quite infectious. I knew the fans were just out out of this world helping us. But it was still a big shock to me. To be fair, we didn't actually have many expectations when we flew out there the first US promo trip. Yeah, we knew it was a big deal to go over there, and it still is, to be fair. But you just don't expect success. Why would you? You hear of so many bands going out there and trying so hard, but ultimately failing. The way we looked at it was, let's just go out there, have a bit of fun, be ourselves, work hard, do as much promo as we can and see what happens. And actually, the other day I was watching a show on ITV. It was like a tribute to the Beatles. And it was like their first trip to America, and we always, like, before we went, and actually while we were there, we watched like the Beatles' first performance on the Ed Sullivan Show in 1964, and that was kind of what broke the Beatles. And I remember we used to get really excited because we used to watch these boys, and we felt like we had a little bit in common with them as people, not as musicians. Because listen, the Beatles are in a league of their own, and there's no doubt about that. But just like all the different personalities in the band, and even now watching that, they said that like that's why it worked. The second time we were out there, we went on the Big Time Rush tour, which was a crazy time. We just didn't really comprehend how all these American fans were singing every word of every song back to us. We'd often be sitting in the back of the bus after a show, and everyone would be just looking a bit dazed, and then would say like, "What the hell is going on here? This is unbelievable." And having thousands of fans turn up to cheer us on in the street before we went on the Today Show was just on another level. There was like 15,000. That program had been built up to be the biggest thing, but to be perfectly honest, we didn't really know much about it because, to be honest, we're not American. We later found out that some of the fans had been queuing overnight in the freezing cold New York streets. Not the safest place in the world to be, but they still did it. I'll never forget the moment when I found out that Up All Night had gone to #1 in America. We were in New York doing some promo. We'd literally hammered every radio station, every TV show, every meet and greet, everything we could possibly throw ourselves at. I was actually in the back of a taxi with my friend going to the Sony offices to collect basketball tickets for a Knicks game that night at Madison Square Garden. Then I got the phone call from our manager. Me and my friend just like punching the head off each other and having a laugh. And then actually we did it so much that the taxi driver ended up just kicking us out of the taxi. That debut album tour went on for ages because we just kept getting dates added and, added every day. Yeah, it was tiring at one point or another for all of us. We were exhausted. We eventually did over like 60, 70 dates, so that tiredness was going to be inevitable, to be fair. But what a buzz, and I still enjoy touring now, and I don't mind. I don't really get homesick, whereas like some of the lads would, but it's not going to last forever, so I might as well enjoy it as much as I can now. I've been to quite a few basketball games and stuff at Madison Square Garden, and everyone knows it's the most famous arena in the world. And for people around us to even come to us and say, "Okay, we're going to do a concert at Madison Square Garden, how do you feel about it?" That sounded ridiculous enough to us, but when it came around, it was amazing. It had a different feeling. I've never seen anyone five lads so nervous before. And, you see it in the movie. We literally just stand there before the show, do our warm-ups and kind of sheepishly get ready. And, after about 20 minutes, it just felt like the best thing ever. The trip to Ghana was an absolutely incredible experience and one we definitely won't forget. And those people out there are just incredible. Their spirits are mind-boggling. You can only try your best for them when you admire them so much. Our Comic Relief single, one way or another, hit #1 in quite a few countries, and it raised over £1 million for Comic Relief, so hopefully that helped. I remember once I had a bottle of water, and I was drinking it, and then I had a flock of about 60 kids standing around me, and I was squirting water into each of their mouths, and it was unbelievable to think that I've got a fridge full of it at home, 6 or 7 taps in my house that's full of it, and they don't have a bit of it. When an album you have goes to #1 in 38 countries, to be honest, it's completely baffling. It was mad enough when Up All Night did so well internationally, as we weren't expecting it. But when the second album, Take Me Home, just blew up all over the world, it was quite hard to take in. How can you not get a massive buzz off that? You'll never get used to that feeling. And obviously, we were all very delighted, and I was also pleased because we'd worked so hard and it seemed to be starting to pay off. Yeah, I personally felt the pressure on that record was huge. Before we did the first album, there was no pressure really. Well, there was a bit, but not as much because people didn't really know us. I honestly felt like we'd had nothing to lose. But with the debut album hitting number one all over the place, now we really had to better ourselves. I know this might sound a bit odd, but that tour was actually quite relaxed. We were doing arenas by now, so quite often we didn't get to the venue till late in the afternoon, which meant we'd had a chance to chill out, catch up on sleep, relax a little. It was great. For a man that loves his sleep, that can only be good news, to be fair. I do waste a lot of my life sleeping. That felt like a proper tour to me. We'd had a little less promo and more time trying to record on the road. So we'd be stacking mattresses against hotel room walls, stuffing pillows everywhere to soundproof a room, just working off a laptop with a couple of speakers, a microphone, pretty basic stuff, but done properly. And it can actually really work because we've done our last two albums on it. I don't think I'll ever see myself as a celebrity, and that's someone who wants to be a celebrity. Who is seen everywhere, gets papped every day of the week. You can stay away from paparazzi. I've done it for the last 4 years. I never really get much bother off them. You either want to be papped or you don't. I go and do my job, go home, then mostly sit in my house. I don't go on many holidays. I prefer to sit in my house mostly. I might go to the pub, have a few pints, watch the football whenever I can. Pretty much do the same thing I'd have done if I was at college back at home. Even if someone was to say I was a celebrity, I'd probably reply by saying I'm the worst celebrity in the world. We were desperate to get our new album out and heard by our fans. We'd always really wanted to get involved as much as we could with the songwriting for our albums. We just had to wait till the time was right. We'd learned so much from various producers and songwriters that we'd been around in the first two albums. So I'd like to think we did a good job. The pressure was on to deliver a big album as well, because we'd now had two huge selling records behind us. Before that came out though, we had the small matter of releasing our own movie, This Is Us. That was such a great time. The film crew had followed us on much of the big second album tour, starting off with the footage of our shows at the O2 in London that we'd done, and it was pretty mad having cameras around us for that long. The premiere for that movie was the most ridiculous day. In fact, I go as far as saying the London premiere might actually be the best day that I've had in my career to date. Touring Australia and all the madness down there was big. The Verona show on tour, when thousands and thousands of people showed up, was memorable. The Today Show, of course. MSG, obviously. Fortunately, it's a long list of highlights. But the film premiere is 100% right up there. And it was a huge moment for us, and for me, it was the first time I'd felt like, this must be quite big. We did our press. We were on the red carpet for literally about an hour and a half, and there was thousands of fans on Leicester Square in London. And I remember we all went upstairs and literally filled ourselves with popcorn and nachos, and did our speech and sat there. And I swear to God, everyone says it to me from this day. Me and Louis were just so hyper. We sat next to each other and we were like screaming and shouting and laughing like stupidly loud over everyone else, and everyone was kind of turning around going, "Who are them two idiots up the back?" We promoted the third album on the 23rd of November last year on 1D Day, which was absolutely unbelievable. Having our own TV show was immense, but it took some doing. Hosting that online show for 7 hours, the team came up with some absolutely incredible ideas and guests, linking up with people in space, Robbie Williams, David Beckham. Everyone was getting involved. In typical One Direction style though, we were terrible at it. We pretty much just blagged the whole 7 hours, missing camera cues, didn't have a clue what we were reading off the auto cue, making stuff up. It was hilarious, but somehow we got through it. Singing live on TV shows is probably the hardest thing. I find that when we perform on our own shows and our own tours, you get into like your own comfort zone, because first of all, you know the show inside out, and you know what kind of crowd you're going to step out to. everyone's going to be having a good time and it's a party atmosphere. So when you do TV shows, it's not always your own crowd. And a lot of the time, if you perform on the X Factor, you have to perform in front of Simon again. So that kind of adds a little bit of nerves. But yeah, I remember doing like the American Music Awards, and we were standing the side stage, and Justin Timberlake was up collecting an award, and then he came over and said hello to us, and we were just about to go on and perform. And I remember in America, when you're going to an award show, they have like on the seats, they always have like pictures of the person that's going to sit there. So during the day when you're doing rehearsal, you just see like Katy Perry, who's sitting next to Lady Gaga, who's sitting next to Justin Timberlake, and they're all in the first 3 or 4 rows for the cameras. So you end up going out to perform to all these unbelievable artists who you look up to, but it honestly makes me like literally feel sick. Fortunately, the fans seem to like Midnight Memories. The commercial success of that record across so many countries was just unbelievable. Hitting #1 in so many places was mad. It meant so much to every single one of us in the band because of the personal nature of the album. We'd made such an effort to stamp our personalities and lives on those songs, so to see the collection of music that it be so well received around the world was a massive deal for us. So we were just delighted. We had a little time off at Christmas, and I went to the States at the start of January for an operation out there. The man literally performed a miracle, and I'm hoping that my knee is fixed forever. Basically, I kept putting it out. I put my knee out about 8 times in about 4 years, and then we went to America last summer when we were touring, obviously, and we played in Denver, Colorado. And I had found out through some people I knew that this guy who did the operation was the best surgeon in the world at knees, and he did all the footballers, who've had knee injuries. So we went to see him, and he said, listen, I don't even have to look at your scan to tell you that you definitely need a big operation on your knee. So I was lucky enough to have stayed in contact with Mr. Jose Mourinho, the manager of Chelsea, after the time we met him at Real Madrid when we were there. And he, brought me down to Chelsea, and I became part of the furniture down there at their training ground, as I spent every day down there during our time off from, say, January to the end of March before we went on tour. And it was great, I got really well looked after. And if I hadn't have had Chelsea, I wouldn't have really had the incentive to go and get my knee fixed properly, because I would have been just seeing a physio once, twice a week, and not really, I'm going to stay in bed today. I don't really want to go and get it done. But I spent every day at Chelsea. I had people around me. I was given a physio and I'm sore, and I had all the gym there for myself and the swimming pool and all these high tech gadgets that they have down there. And I was properly well looked after. As I've said, the 2013 World Tour was ridiculous. The scale of it was hard to take in. So you can imagine how we felt when it was put to us that there was a chance we could be playing stadiums on our next tour. We were all like, we won't sell stadiums out. Forget that. That's a big jump to go from theatres to arenas. And there are plenty of bands who made that move too soon and paid the price. So to then go from arenas to, say, 10,000 people to 20,000 people, on average, to stadiums filled with as many as 85,000 people is a massive gamble in a lot of ways. But don't get me wrong, we are confident of One Direction and we work hard to make the band succeed. But I'm not afraid to admit that there was some, trepidation when the idea of a stadium tour was first mentioned. We kind of just thought there are much bigger artists out there, who can't do stadiums, so why think that One Direction can? In typical mad One Direction style, even announcing the stadium tour was nuts. We were working in Europe. We flew into London on the evening, went to Wembley Stadium the next morning, did our press conference, and then flew straight back to Zurich, where we were going to do a show that night. And it was all a bit crazy. I don't know if any people know this, but we call the tour Where We Are Tour because we always whenever we go somewhere unbelievable, like we're doing unbelievable concerts or something, like we just go, look where we are. Kind of stand there going, look where we are. And that's where the name of the tour came out. So Croke Park was a special one. I auditioned. I did my first production rounds of the X Factor at Croke Park alongside 15,000 people. And I queued outside Croke Park at 5 o'clock in the morning. And then turns out that, 4 years later, and very fortunately we got to, first of all, play it, but sell it out 3 nights in a row. And, that's my national stadium. And I've been there hundreds of games and, different events. And to be up there on the stage was just absolutely ridiculous. I was very fortunate, as we just spoke about, to stand outside Croke Park on a March freezing cold morning at 5 o'clock, and then 4 years later be standing on stage in a sold out 85,000 seater stadium. Being in One Direction has given me so much. The experiences I've had in this band, are so incredible. And it's only when I sit back and work on something like this book that I can't even begin to comprehend what amazing time we've had. We were sat at home one day and then suddenly our lives changed forever. And here we are now. From day one we just wanted to be ourselves, have a great time, work hard and see where it took us. You couldn't have ever predicted or imagined what's happened with One Direction in the last few years. I've been around the world with the lads and we've had a few crazy times and still ahead of us, no doubt. But do you know what? I'm still mad about being in this band.